Om Jnanatimirandhasya Jnananjana Shalakaya Chakshurun Militam Yena Tasmai Shri Gurave Namaha Shri Caitanya Manobhishtam Sthapitam Yena Bhutale Swayam Rupa Kada Mahyam Dadati Sva Pradantikam Vandeham Shri Guru Shri Yuttapada Kamanam Shri Gurun Vaishnavam Shri Rupam Sagrajatam Sahagana Raghunathanvitam Sajivam Sadvaitam Savadhutam Parijana Sahitam Krishna Chaitanya Devam Shri Radha Krishna Padan Sahagana Lalita Shri Vishakhan Vitamscha He Krishna Karuna Sindhu Dinabandhu Jagatpate Gopesha Gopika Kanta Radha Kanta Namostute Tapta Kanchana Gaurangi Radhe Vrindavaneshwari Vrishabhanu Sute Devi Pranamami Hari Priye Namo Mahavadanyaya Krishna Prema Privayate Krishnaya Krishna Chaitanya Namne Gora Tushe Namaha Panchakalpatarubhyascha Kripa Sindhubhyevacha Patitanam Pavanebhyo Vaishnavebhyo Namo Namaha Jaya Shri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Shri Advaita Gadadara Shri Vasadi Gaura Bhaktavrinda Hare Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare Hare. Okay, well, Hare Krishna. Let us go ahead then. Let me just let in everyone in the waiting room. Okay, so as we all remember from last week, we are continuing into chapter 7. As already discussed, chapter 7 is Krishna elaborating upon bhakti, right? And so in order for bhakti to occur, in order for devotion to occur to Krishna, well, one needs to know who Krishna is, right? And this is what this chapter is establishing. As we've already discussed, it is knowledge of the absolute, right? And so what have we discussed so far in terms of knowledge of the absolute? Also, I really liked it in the test when we had our cameras on. So as many cameras on as we can have, if that's all good. So Krishna, he's describing his nature, he's describing who he is, and he's describing the energies, how everything relates to him, right? And then what we've had that whole description of Krishna's relationship to the energies, and therefore Krishna is everything, everything is Krishna, and yet Krishna is not everything and everything is not Krishna, right? Who can tell me what is the Sanskrit term for this? It's the Sanskrit term for our philosophy. I heard the Chintapeda Veda, but very faintly. Maybe I'll turn my audio up. Definitely heard it from someone unless I hallucinated, but I'll turn my audio up. Hopefully I can hear you all a little better there. So Achintya Bheda, right? And putting the term Achintya into the name, it was a little difficult. That's all right. We'll keep dwelling on it as we go along. Having discussed that, the natural question occurs. Well, if everything is Krishna, then why does everyone not surrender onto Krishna? And therefore, Krishna, he describes the 4 people who do surrender onto him and the 4 people who don't. So then we did our dramas. Big congratulations to all of you. I'm sure you'd all be able to get into NIDA if you tried. But today we'll sort of go through the philosophy of it. So as Mrugank stopped sharing the screen, I was going to say, let's start writing up the list of them and discuss a tiny bit about each one of them. I'm not even going to say it might be in your test. It will be in your test to recite all of these. So that's why I'm putting a bit of emphasis on it. Please internalize this list, okay? So let's begin then. Let's begin with the 4 people who do not surrender onto Krishna. Mrugank Prabhu, if you want to get the notes up, but don't write them up. Because this will be in the test, I want all of you to, 1 person each, no one's allowed to say more than 1, say one of the 4 people who do not surrender to Krishna. And no one's allowed to say more than 1. Although at this point, I think we'll be lucky if anyone says 1. Okay, somebody shout it out.
Mura. Mura?
Mudha, yeah, very good.
Naradhama?
Yes, Naradhamas, very good. The other one's very easy. They have big mustaches that curl on the end.
Mayapur jnana.
Yes, those aren't the ones with the mustaches, but they're definitely they're the hard ones to remember. I'll be very impressed for anyone who remembers them in the test. The mayapur jnana. And then the last one, there are good mustachioed villains. The who can tell me? I'll give you a hint. It begins with A and rhymes with Sura.
Asurim.
Yes, Jai, Asuras, the demons. Okay, so those are the four people who do not surrender onto Krishna. What's interesting with all of these is that our acharyas define all of them differently, right? So Prabhupada, he gives some sort of definition. Vishnu Chakravarti Thakur gives different ones. Baladev Vidyabhushan gives different ones. Ramanuja Acharya gives different ones. I haven't read Madhvacharya's commentary on the Gita, but I'm sure he gives different ones, right? Just based on that. So we have a lot of different variety on what these four mean. So they're rather flexible concepts, right? So let's go through each one of them then. What order have we done them in? Perfectly, we've done them in order of the shloka. So if we begin with the Mudha, how do we understand the Mudha? How do we understand his or her position? Well, Srila Prabhupada at least, he writes that those who work very hard day and night to clear the burden of self-created duties say that they have no time to hear of the immortality of the living being, right? So these people are, I think the Catholics have an interesting word for them. They're invincibly ignorant, right? Which is always, I think, a nice way to put it, right? Srila Prabhupada really takes them as these are people who are just completely absorbed in hard work and they're just completely ignorant to any higher topics, right? Mishra Chakravarti Thakur, he gives a rather similar sort of understanding, as do all of other acharyas, really. These are people who are completely absorbed in fruitive work. And in one sense, these are the best of the four. Because they don't really have any, they have a good excuse, right? They're just completely ignorant, right? And there's many people like this, right? Many people like this. You can go, like some people genuinely, the beginning and end of their life is to work very, very hard, day in and day out, right? They'll work, all up 10 hours of their day are given to work in order for them to have enough money so that they can pay off their TV and go out and spend the rest of the money on drinks, right? And this is the whole cycle of their life. They're not thinking about any culture. They're not going even slightly deep into anything. It's just that complete cycle. And that's a significant chunk of society today in every country, right? Right? So these are people who are completely blind to any higher talk, right? Baladev Vidyabhushan even says that these are the Pashandis, right? Who can tell me what is a Pashandi? Just some revision of the first 6 chapters.
Who thinks the demigods are equal to Krishna?
Yes, an atheist who thinks that the demigods are equal to Krishna. Baladev Vidyabhushan says that the Mudhas are often Pashandis, right? They often think that, Vishnu, Indra, all the same, right? And we see this, right? Maybe not so much in the West, but in India, we'll see this, right? They'll labor very hard and then they'll think, Indra, Vishnu, whoever, I'll just give a bit of money to them and they'll help me make more money, which I can spend on my nice, chicken sandwiches and, alcohol-fueled weddings. So this is the Buddha, right? Next then we have the Naradhama. The Naradhama, how does Srila Prabhupada define that? Do any of us know?
Lowest of mankind.
Yes, the lowest of mankind.
Basically,
Sorry. No, you go.
They've like kind of lost their ability or their chance to revive their relationship with God.
Yeah. So they're like people, they're civilized. They're not like the mudhas who are just completely absorbed in sense gratification. They have some sort of civilized aspect to them, but but they're not so interested, right? Vishwanath Chakravarti Thakur, interestingly enough, he says that they might even take to bhakti for a while, but then they give up on it. But Srila Prabhupada seems to indicate that they just never take up to bhakti at all, right? So these are people who are of a very, very high background. We see this in Sydney a lot, right? You'll meet a lot of people and they'll say, oh, I am a Brahmin, right? And what do they mean by that? They mean that their parents, or maybe their grandparents, or maybe their great-great-great-great-great-great-grandparents were at one point Brahmins, right? But you'll see them, and then what are they doing? They're drinking alcohol, eating onion and garlic, etc., etc. Maybe the only time they wore their Brahminical thread was when they had the Upanayana Sanskar, you know what I mean? And that's it, right? That was the first time they put it on, and that was it, right? And the last time they took it off, right, was on that day. So this is described as the Naradhama, right? Maybe they had some exposure to some sort of elevated culture, but they themselves, they themselves are very degraded. The Dvija Bandhus, right? They're friends of the twice born. But even at this point, we can say they might be friends of the Shudras or friends of the Vaishyas, like they have no position, right? So the Naradhama is somebody who, even though they did, unlike the Mudhas, right? The Mudhas really have a good excuse of just invincible ignorance. But the Naradhama, they are aware that there is religion, there is culture, there is spirituality, but they're not too fussed. Much more appealing to them is to act like the Mudha does, right? Labor away in intoxication and sense gratification. Heavy stuff this shlok is, but what to do? And we can see people like this around us all the time, right? And what's really interesting is that the majority of society is either a Naradhama or a Mudha, right? The Mudha or the Naradhama is the most common one. We can think all around us we see. And yet, the majority of us who are practicing Krishna consciousness today, at some point were a Mudha or a Naradhama, right? Very few of us have been Krishna conscious since birth, right? So this is the Mudha Naradhama, even though it seems like we're speaking condescendingly, actually, whenever I read this section, I always think very gratefully, right? Because without a doubt, I would be a Mudha without the mercy of Sri Caitanya Mahaprabhu and Srila Prabhupada. Does that make sense? It's not something that we really condescending look down upon. I often like to look at this list, and as we go ahead, some of us might identify with some of the other two, but definitely these first two, we can see, oh yeah, this is something that very much I would be, right? Right? I can very much resonate with these qualities, with these mindsets. And yet we can see, who was Sri Krishna Chaitanya Mahaprabhu come to deliver? What is one of the titles we give to Mahaprabhu? Patita Pavana. What does this mean? What does it mean, Patita Pavana? Who can tell me?
Deliverer of the fallen.
Deliverer of the most fallen, right? And what is Mahaprabhu coming to give? Is Mahaprabhu coming to give liberation? No. He's coming to give bhakti. But what form of bhakti is Mahaprabhu coming to give?
The highest, like that of the gopis.
Yes, the highest form of bhakti, ragatmik bhakti. The whole practice of raganuga would not be practiced. And if those words seem foreign to you, we'll get around to them in Nectar of Devotion, right? But the highest form of devotion, which again, we will hear about when we do Nectar of Devotion, Mahaprabhu is giving. Mahaprabhu's open up the floodgates to the most esoteric and the most intense forms of love. And who is he giving them to? Is he giving them in Satya Yuga, the golden age where everyone is wonderful and elevated? No, he's coming in Kali Yuga. And who is he distributing it to? He's distributing it to Mudhas and Naradhanas, right? And this is why we can say Chaitanya Mahaprabhu is the most merciful. Why? Because he's giving the highest thing to the lowest of people. If Mahaprabhu was not doing this, we could not say that the Supreme Personality of Godhead is the most merciful, because he is not the most merciful that can be. Only that personality who is giving the highest thing to the lowest of people can be considered the most merciful. And therefore, we find Mahaprabhu, he is distributing out all of this. And therefore we find Srila Prabhupada. What do we know in Srila Prabhupada's pranam mantra, right? Namaste Saraswate Deve. What comes next? Gauravani Pracharine, right? He's preaching that message and mission of Gaur Mahaprabhu. So what is the point there? Srila Prabhupada himself is embodying this mood as well. What do we see with this gun? When Srila Prabhupada's elevated disciples, right? We can think of, we talk about Prabhupada disciples with such awe and reverence for a reason, right? They are some very, just recently I've been reading from, I'm forgetting the title now, but Satyaraj Prabhu has written this official biography of Srila Jayapataka Maharaj. And you're just reading it and you're hearing about the background of so many other devotees that joined at the same time as Jayapataka Maharaj. And even in the Smitāmṛta, you'll hear like all of these sort of hippies and all are joining, right, at that sort of time. And yet, they're becoming some of the most elevated devotees who've ever walked the earth, right? So we're seeing here, Srila Prabhupada, he's continuing that mood of Patita Pavana, right? So again, when we take this list, it is not a list that we use condescendingly, but rather a list that we use to understand the glories of the devotees and the glories of Supreme Lord, that they will turn all of these personalities, Milwaukee to Mayapur, that's it. I'm not sure if I'm pronouncing the Americans place correctly, but I think I'm pronouncing Mayapur correctly. So yeah, taking all of these things and making them very elevated. So before we continue, so is the application of 715 on the basis, I'm not sure what that means.
So Krishna is basically calling these people dushkritanos, impious people, and they do not surrender unto him. Is this on the basis that there's no intervention by him, a la Chaitanya Mahaprabhu?
Yeah, exactly. The most sinful people become the greatest devotees. I mean, that's the whole point of Jai and Vijay, right? I mean, Jai and Vijay on their good days were mudhas, you know what I mean? No. Allah meaning like it in the example. Yeah. Okay, yeah. So Jai and Vijay, right? What was their whole point, right? Jai and Vijay there. Again, what terrible things they've done. As devotees, we don't believe in an eternal hell, but I heard Radhanath Maharaj say that if Jai and Vijay were to go to the hellish planets, it basically would have been the first people to experience eternal hellish punishment in the history of the universe, right? I've heard this, Radhanath Maharaj gives this analysis. So, and yet, what does Mahaprabhu do? Well, Mahaprabhu actually goes to kill them, but that's a whole separate pastime. But then who comes along? Nityananda Prabhu, right? And Nityananda Prabhu, he begs Mahaprabhu, he says, no, give them your mercy. And then of course they become great devotees, right? So yeah, this is assuming these people do not surrender with the assumption that that there is no divine intervention. Yeah, you're correct. And of course, that's why we say Srila Prabhupada is a Shakti Vaishnavatar. But I remember I was making this point. Who is he Shakti Vaishnavatar of? Who has empowered him? Right? It's Nityananda Prabhu. Right? Because Nityananda Prabhu, actually, when we see Mahaprabhu preaching, Mahaprabhu is primarily preaching to people like Sarvabhauma Bhattacharya, right? Very elevated people in society, right? He's preaching to Rai Ramananda, right? Who's quite literally a Rai, right? Like he's quite literally an elevated personality. Who else is he preaching to? He's preaching to Now I'm mind blanking the king's name. I'm sure some of you can tell me. It's on the tip of my tongue. What's his
King
name?
Prataparudra. King
Sorry?
Prataparudra.
Yeah. Maharaj Prataparudra. He's preaching to all these people. Who is Nityananda Prabhu preaching to? Just the random people on the street, right? So Nityananda Prabhu, very much, his mood is what has empowered Srila Prabhupada. So we can say it's by divine intervention. I would say it's even particularly by the intervention of Nityananda Prabhu. Because who is Nityananda Prabhu? Again, now we're tangenting a bit, but it's an interesting point. Nityananda Prabhu is the Akhanda Guru Tattva. We talk about how the Guru is one. We discussed this when we discussed the Parampara. The Guru is an individual manifestation of one divine principle. And Nityananda Prabhu is that divine principle that is manifesting and empowering the Guru. Okay, let's keep on going. So then next we have the Mayapahrita Jnani. So the Mayapahrita Jnani is basically somebody who has read so much that they've just become bewildered, right? The Mayapahrita Jnani, they've read all of these different things and they've just become bewildered into their understanding. We can say the Naradhama, I keep on mispronouncing it, the Naradhama is what they are due to a lack of intelligence, right? The Naradhama, he's exposed to knowledge, but he lacks the intellectual ability to properly engage with it. We can say the Mayapahrita Jnani. What is he? It's a Jnani. Jnana would refer to the knowledge, but Jnani is the holder of the knowledge. The Mayapahrita Jnani, what is he? He has too much intelligence, if you will. Not to say that intelligence is bad, but he overanalyzes everything until he manages to completely confuse himself. You could say he's overconfident in his intelligence. The Mayapahrita Jnani knows so much, and then he just sort of confuses himself. And this can also be the case with scripture. Sadhguru, I wouldn't call Sadhguru overly intelligent. I wouldn't say that's his problem. But yeah, you could say that a lot of Sadhguru followers in particular, right? Because they hear him say all this stuff and they go, ooh, right? They're definitely interested, but it's all very, yeah. The example actually that our acharyas give are mainly two. They either give the example of the follower of Sankhya. So Sankhya, you could say, is almost very scientific, right? I would say a good modern example would be somebody like, yeah, maybe even a Richard Dawkins, right? Like that sort of energy, right? He's very intelligent. He's learned to like Richard Dawkins is a great scientist, right? If anyone says he's not a good scientist, they're wrong. Like Richard Dawkins is very, very good at science. But with that, it developed intelligence. He sort of says relatively silly things that aren't very true when it comes to religion, right? The other example that's given, Vishwanath Chakravarti Thakur actually gives it, is a person who reads all of the scriptures and they study them so deeply that they just end up not knowing what they say. Which is actually the example that's given of the faithless person, all the way back in the first 6 chapters of the Gita. And then finally we reach the Asura, the demon, right? And the Asura is the person who is openly atheistic, right? They just straight up hate God, right? It reminds me of Christopher Hitchens, I think, or Stephen Fry. They said, if God did exist, I would hate him even more. That is the Asura mentality right on display, right? And so, yeah, and so there's different reasons why people might hold to this, but it's an open rejection, right? The Naradhama, he's just intoxicated. That's the thing. We think of all of these and we think they're all virulent atheists, right? But they're not. The Naradhama might even say, yeah, there's a God. Yeah, my family's really religious, they'll say stuff like that. Yeah. But then they'll go off into sense gratification. When we say these people don't surrender, we're not saying all of these are the virulent atheists. Only the asura is the virulent atheist, right? So in that sense, Richard Dawkins is a bad example for the third, right? The third just comes up with all these theories and all. Actually, you know what? I take it back. Sadhguru would be a good example, Alex. Sadhguru would be a good example of the third type, the mayapur jnani, right? Overdeveloped intelligence. And it's all just as speculative because I can think of a cool thought. I'll propose it as the truth, right? I can, and therefore I will, right? The Naradhama, again, he knows his spiritual life, but he'd rather just get high, right? That's it, right? The Mudha, again, the Mudha, invincibly ignorant. I have a bit of, we have a lot of compassion for Mudhas, especially, right? They just don't know any better. But the Asura, that is the virulent atheist, right? That is the person who hates God, right? And even them, I feel like we can have a bit of compassion for, in the sense that a lot of Asuras, they hate God because they've been exposed to a bad idea of God, right? They've been exposed to the, to the idea of God. He's this guy floating up in the sky with a big beard, and he hates certain amount of people. And if you don't follow exactly his rules, he's going to throw you in an eternal bonfire. And anyone who he likes, even if they're really, really bad people, they're going to be sitting on the clouds playing sithars with him, right? I mean, if that's your idea of God, I can understand why you end up hating that sort of conception of God, right? But that being said, that's not all Asuras. Many Asuras will have proper knowledge of who God is, and they will still hate. So these are the four people who do not surrender to Krishna, okay? Before we go into the four people who do surrender, does anyone have any questions? I apologize for being sick a second lesson in a row. I hope your ears aren't suffering from my gross coughing all the time. Mrugank Prabhu, you raised your hand?
Yeah, one thing I always wonder when I see these categories is this like an exhaustive list that can be shown, like either by argument or otherwise, that this definitely covers every kind of atheist as an umbrella? Or is it just like four kinds that Krishna says don't surrender, but there could be other things?
I mean, I don't know if it's explicitly an exhaustive list, but I struggle to think of examples that don't fit on the list, if you get what I mean. Like, I haven't read, to my knowledge, anything which really straight up explicitly says this is exhaustive. But yeah, I mean, I couldn't think of somebody who doesn't fit there, right? Because when you think about it, it's really based on knowledge and favorability. One who is aggressively unfavorable, it actually doesn't matter how much they know, they're going to be an asura, right? one who is, how do I put it? Not favorable, how much hatred one has towards the Lord. You either love him, you're neutral, or you have hatred. If you have hatred, it doesn't matter how much you know, you're going to be an asura, right? But then with the remaining ones, you're either totally ignorant, or you have some knowledge and your sense gratification is out of control, or you have too much knowledge and your sense gratification is also still out of control. To me, it seems pretty systematic. I couldn't imagine a fifth category, right? But I mean, I'm not saying there couldn't be. I don't want to go out on a limb and base my and say this is exhaustive. I just couldn't think of anyone who wouldn't fit on that list.
What were the two things you mentioned? Favorability and...
Well, favorability is more a thing for all 8 people we're going to discuss. There's the people who are neutral to the Supreme Lord. There's the people who hate the Supreme Lord, which are asuras, and then there are the people who are favorable, which is the next 4, the people who do surrender, right? So the Mudha, the Naradhama, and the mayapur jnani, in a sense, they're neutral, right? Because what's taking them away from the Supreme Lord is either their overly developed intelligence, their underly developed intelligence, or their complete lack of knowledge altogether.
Okay.
Does that make sense?
Yeah. Thank you.
So it's knowledge and favorability.
I think I just struggle to see a spectrum, but I'll think about it.
I don't think it's a spectrum. I think it's a Cartesian sort of like XY axis sort of thing.
Okay, even then, but we can talk about it after.
Yeah, for sure. Okay, then let's go into text 17 again. 16. Again, I'll have all of you contribute. Who are the Chaturvidha Bhajante Mam? Who are the 4 kinds of people who render service unto Krishna?
The inquisitive?
Yep, the inquisitive. And the inquisitive the inquisitive is considered in Sanskrit. What is the Sanskrit for the inquisitive?
The jignasu.
Yep, the jignasu.
Is that the first one?
That's the second one.
Okay.
First one is, I think, a Sukritina, those who are pious.
Yep. Wait, the who?
Sukritina, Prabhuji?
Oh yeah, that's yep.
Isn't Sukritina not one of them?
Isn't Sukritina?
No, Sukritina is all of them.
It's all of
Sukritina
them.
is all of them. Yeah, that's why I was confused for a second. Yeah, no. So all of them are Sukritina. That would be the title of them.
Okay, then it's
Yeah.
Artha, who are distressed.
Yeah, the Artha is the one who's distressed. Once again, so I'm a bit sick. My mind is not fully in my subtle body is like having a vacation. It's just gross body today. And then the third one. Who can tell me?
Artharthi.
Sorry?
Artharthi.
Yep. The Artharthi. And what are they? Do you want to give us a definition?
Those who seek material things.
Yep. And then who is our final one? Who is our final candidate? Who can tell me? Who is the final one? Okay. Oh, the hungry. Yeah, the hungry is the fifth one, the unspoken fifth one. No, the Gyani.
Yeah.
How are we defining Jnani here?
The Gyani is the one who is in knowledge. Let's just put it like that. Let's be hyper literal.
Like in knowledge or looking for knowledge?
Sorry?
In knowledge or looking for knowledge?
No. I would put them in knowledge. But it's up to you. You can write in knowledge. I mean, looking for knowledge if you want. But I take looking for knowledge more to refer to the jigyasu. Yeah, searching for the knowledge of the absolute is what Prabhupada says. But yeah, you can do a / if you want. Like there's both ways are rendered by different acharyas. You'll find them rendered in both ways. Because one who is in knowledge is also searching for knowledge of the absolute. If you get what I mean, you need to be in a certain level of knowledge. You need to know what you're looking for, if you get what I mean. So there's different dimensions of it. But yeah, definitely / Okay, so these are the 4. Okay, we're going at a snail's pace because I want you guys to internalize this because it will be in the exam. Okay. Now, we find that there's an example given for each one of these 4 from Shastra. Who can tell me who is the example of the Artha? Who can think of examples? I won't make it a right or wrong thing. Who can think of examples from Shastra of somebody who is the Artha?
Yudhishthira Maharaj.
Sorry?
Artha, like an example from Shastra, like some character.
Yeah. But how is he the example?
Okay. Oh, sorry, I was thinking Gyani.
Gajendra.
Gajendra?
Yeah, Gajendra is the one that is the standard one. He is the standard example, right? Because we know Gajendra, what's happening is he's getting sorry.
Draupadi?
Draupadi would also be in that category, yes.
Queen Kunti?
Sorry?
Queen Kunti?
Yeah, Queen Kunti, yeah. Obviously, all of them would be examples in that specific moment. So they're examples of people who are calling onto the Lord but I don't want to say that they are in this category either, if you get what I mean. So Queen Kunti is not in this category because she's a pure devotee, but she is doing the pastime of calling out to the Lord in distress. I just need to clarify that. Same with Draupadi. However, Gajendra would be an example of somebody who was purified and who was actually in this category. And I'll explain why that's important in a second after we give examples, because we're going to learn a new concept just before we go on our break. It won't be new to most of you, but it'll be new in terms of the syllabus. Okay, so we know Gajendra, he gets bitten by a crocodile, right? And for however many countless eons, he's wrestling with the crocodile, and then as he's about to die, he sees all of his friends and family around him, and they can't help him. So he picks up the the lotus flower, and he offers it up to the Supreme Lord and calls out for help. And what's really fun, I love it, when you guys study Bhagavatam, look out for this the next time you're reading Gajendra's pastimes. Gajendra prays and he says, "Oh, formless Lord, oh Lord without qualities." He prays all of these things out, and then who appears? A very formed Lord, full of beautiful qualities right in front of him. If you read the purports, you'll understand why that makes sense. But it's very, very sweet. Okay, next up, the Jigyasu. Who's an example of the Jigyasu?
The sages in the forest of Naimisharanya, like Shaunaka Rishi.
Shaunaka Rishi in particular is mentioned by Purijan Prabhu. But yeah, the sages in general. So in Srimad Bhagavatam, they're the ones who are asking the questions, right? They're saying, oh, Sutta Goswami, oh, great sage, tell us how was the Srimad Bhagavatam spoken? What should we do in this Kali Yuga? Most of us will have read the first canto, at least the first chapter of the first canto of Bhagavatam several times more than we've read the rest of the Bhagavatam. It's always the New Year's resolution. This year I will read Srimad Bhagavatam, and then, we sort of reach the second canto and then stop. It's a bit of an unfortunate habit. Don't worry, I've done the same thing many times, so I'm not saying that in a judging way. Artharthi. Who is an example of the Artharthi? Artharthi.
Maharaj?
Sorry?
Prahlad Maharaj?
Prahlad Maharaj would not so much, but Dhruva Maharaj is. Because Prahlad Maharaj is the whole time surrendered to Krishna.
Okay.
He's never asking for anything.
Prabhu, I meant Dhruv, I mixed.
Oh, okay, yeah. No, Dhruva Maharaj, right? We know Dhruva Maharaj, right? He's there with his father, Uttanapad, right? And he's there and he wants to sit on his lap, and he gets kicked away, and Uttam gets the position anyways. I always find it funny, right? If your sibling is named Uttam, the greatest, there's probably some favoritism going on there, right? So Dhruva, he's very upset, and he goes out to the forest in order to do some austerities. And what's he saying? The whole time he's saying, I will do all of these austerities, and after I do this, I will I will attain a greater kingdom than my father. I don't want a kingdom as great as my father. I'll achieve a greater throne than my father, right? And of course, I won't go in reciting the whole pastime. It's a famous pastime. Narad Muni, he comes along, tells him to go home. He's a little child. I always forget. I think our acharyas actually differ exactly how old he is, but somewhere in the ballpark of 5. And, so he's a little kid, right? And they say, go home. And then with his Kshatriya anger, he says, no, I'll do it anyways. We all know Srikanta Sena Prabhu gave us a wonderful rendition of it last week. The whole universe starts choking in the intensity of his austerity, and then he sees the Supreme Lord and he thinks, what was I after? I wanted glass and now I've seen a diamond. I wanted tofu and now I've had paneer. That's sort of, that's his great spiritual experience. Okay, and then finally the Jnani. Who is the example of the Jnani?
Sukadeva Goswami.
Yes, Shukdev Goswami. Shukdev Goswami is given as an example, and the 4 Kumaras are given as an example as well, right? So we have both Shukdev Goswami and we have the 4 Kumaras. Why? Because they're both searching for knowledge, right? I think that's pretty straightforward. Now, all of these 4 elevated people will start making progress now through the chapter. Of these, who is the greatest?
Jnani?
The Jnani. Why is the Jnani the greatest?
Because all others, they want something. Jnani is purely want Krishna.
Oh, so the Jnani is a pure devotee.
No, no.
Is that our determination?
No. Like out of these 4, I think like Artha Arthi is coming like I want something. Inquisitive is again, they just want to know more. But Jnani is someone who's really going directly for Krishna, like in a way that he wants to know the absolute.
So the Jnani is the greatest. You're onto it. You're onto it.
Between these 4.
Because the Jnani is what we would consider to be on the platform of, on the yoga ladder, we would put him on the platform of Nishkama Karma Yoga or Jnana Yoga. But at the very least, he's executing some form of Buddhi Yoga. He doesn't have any, he is desireless, right? Srikanta Sena Prabhu's asked, oh no, I meant to say that, wanting paneer but getting tofu, that's what I meant. Paneer is clearly the better option. So he doesn't have any desires, right? We will, and of course, text 17 elaborates on this. Before we get to that, I want to touch upon the topic of Mishra Bhakti. Vishwanath Chakravarti Thakur actually says, for this chapter, now when we're speaking about Bhakti, we are speaking about something very different than from the first 6 chapters. In the first 6 chapters, even if we were to consider that there is some Bhakti present there, the Bhakti is not very prominent, okay? So the first 6 chapters of the Bhagavad-Gītā describe something where Bhakti is not so prominent. When Bhakti becomes more prominent, but it is not pure, we get these 4 personalities. But these 4 personalities are not pure devotees, okay? This is Mishra Bhakti, yes. Yeah, I was going to say, let's not mix up our our transliteration. This is Mishra Bhakti, mixed devotion. Okay, so this is devotion. Okay, and I remember one of you asked Abhishek Prabhu when we were discussing the yoga ladder, is this karma Mishra Bhakti? And Abhishek Prabhu gave exactly the answer. No. Karma Mishra Bhakti is incredibly more elevated than anything else here on the yoga ladder. Okay. I'm seeing Jaswant Prabhu's raised his hand. I'll take the question.
Prabhu, like, I don't know, it could be a silly doubt. With Artha, so seeking material benefits, like when we think about the Asuras, like who do tapasya, a lot of tapasya for seeking some sort of material benefits to demigods, like how can we see the differentiation between like surrendering to Lord and non? Out of the categories what we have, like how can we understand the difference? Because they are also seeking some material benefits and they're doing austerity.
Yeah, but they're doing
like
it, as you said, they're doing it not to the Supreme. They're not surrendering unto the Supreme Lord because of it, right? That's the key difference right there. And we'll discuss that as we get deeper into chapter 7. It discusses the nature of surrender to the demigods and stuff like that.
Okay.
And it's not too pretty. I still remember one devotee was on saying, oh, it never says not to surrender to the demigods in the Bhagavad-Gītā. And I was like, oh, okay, you're in for a surprise if you ever read it. Yeah, we're going to hear some heavy language about surrender to demigods. Again, sometimes people can misunderstand it as blaspheming the demigods. That's not our industry. Our industry is to very much revere them, but definitely not to worship them. That's a very different category.
Was it just the providence that that Dhruva's mother mentioned about Lord Hari, that you can get it from Lord Hari, and he wanted to get the kingdom greater than his father from Lord Hari? had she told him, ask from Brahma, he would have done the same. He would have gone, and because all he wanted was a kingdom. It just happens to be that he got that from Hari.
I get it. I'm not trying to interrupt. I get your question. It's because at the time it wasn't how do I put it? It wasn't contemporary sort of like Hindu society or something where there is that attitude, if you go here, you go there. You know what I mean? There was a much better understanding of the Shastras, right? So it wasn't like, it's not like, oh, I've woken up and I really like Krishna, so I've chosen Krishna as my, it wasn't anything sentimental, right? Like that, there was an understanding of the philosophy. So it wasn't providence. She understood the purport of the Vedic literature, which is that Krishna is the supreme reality, the supreme personality of Godhead. So, I mean, in one hand, it is providence, but it's not like, oh, it could have gone any other way, and she could have just decided, well, Brahma is where you should go, right? Because she was actually a person of understanding.
Sorry, Prabhu, my point was more from the context of Dhruva. Dhruva Maharaj, he did not have that in-depth knowledge. He was simply following the instruction given to her by her mother. If her mother had told her, you go to Brahma to get this, because Brahma could do that probably too, do what he wanted, material benefit, and he followed the instruction.
It's possible that could have happened. I mean, we always have to be upfront with stuff like that we don't know. You know what I mean? Like, but in one hand, that's everyone. Nobody realizes that Krishna is the supreme personality of Godhead until they run into a devotee, right? So in one sense, yeah, that's true. But that's true of anyone who takes up to devotional service of any kind, right? The guidance of the devotee is essential. The contact with the devotees is essential, right? So you can, in that sense, yeah, that's true. But would it have gone differently? I don't know. You can build a time machine and find out for us. But yeah. Vishaka Mataji?
Sorry, I don't know if this is a silly question, but so I understand why one is probably better than the other, but what I don't understand is that if all these four people lead you to Krishna, why does it differ with which pathway is chosen? Does that make sense?
So because they all do get better, and we'll discuss that when we discuss text 17. Because there Krishna says the Gyani is the best. So we'll get around to that, because all of these are inferior to pure bhakti. Hopefully most of us are already on a higher platform than these four, okay? Maybe not, but yeah, we'll discuss that. All of these aren't a platform we want to be on. The platform we want to be on will be your memory shloka, which maybe a few of you will already know for the Nectar of Devotion, which is Anyabhilashita Shunyam Jnana Karmadhyanapritam Anukulyena Krishnanu Shilanam Bhaktir Uttama, right? Bhaktir Uttama, the greatest form of bhakti, is devoid of jnana, which the Gyani has, and karma, which the others have. How do they have it? Well, I'll get back to defining Mishra Bhakti, and then in text 17, we'll get to your question. So Mishra Bhakti is when the devotion is mixed with other intentions, with other desires. The way that it generally is broken down is that the first three are practicing karma Mishra Bhakti, which means they have some desire for karma and the karma kanda benefits mixed in, right? So the person who is in distress, right, he wants to have some relief of his pain. That is something that is on the karma platform, right? Same with the inquisitive, because he's trying to get some sort of knowledge from it, if you get what I mean, not less realization. And seeking material benefits is quite literally the definition of karma kanda. The Gyani is mixed with Jnana, right? So he is beyond the platform of desires. So we can infer from this that the Jigyasu is inquisitive with some sort of material desires. The Gyani doesn't have material desires, and instead he approaches Krishna in order to deepen his his meditation. Oh, Jai, please share it into the WhatsApp group, Prabhu. I don't know if you guys know what a tautology is. A tautology is like saying ATM machine. you've said the same thing twice, or like saying a stupid dumb person. No, a stupid idiot is another tautology, right? You've said the same thing twice. I always like to say that a good class from Bhakti-śāstrī Maharaj is a tautology, because the moment it's a class from Bhakti-śāstrī Maharaj, it's inherently going to be good. So yes, please share. Please share the class into the WhatsApp group. What is interesting, however, is that in Caitanya Smitāmṛta, and I'm just exposing you to all of this to trigger a faith crisis, is that Krishna's Kaviraj Thakur actually defines the list differently. I will, Mrugank Prabhu, if you want to, just because I feel like it'll be easier for you to throw it up on the screen, Madhya Leela, chapter 24, text 95. Uh, 2495. Okay. Oh, yeah, there we go. So here we find there's the same list. Is anyone familiar with this text from CC? So here we actually find Krishna's Kaviraj Thakur. He breaks it down in a slightly different way. I actually tend to prefer Krishna's Kaviraj Thakur's way. I think it makes more sense to me personally, but both ways are valid from our acharyas. I want to expose you guys to this just so you get a feel of our acharyas do disagree at times. That is not the end of the world, because some people really have a heart attack when the first time they see acharyas really disagreeing, right? Because you can't reconcile this disagreement. It just is two totally different ways of discussing the philosophy. So, Artho ortharthi dui shokama bhitore goni jigyasu jnani dui moksha kama man. Okay, maybe we can have Tanya Mataji. Would you like to read out the translation?
Yeah, sure. Materialistic devotees take to devotional service and worship Krishna when they are distressed or in need of money. Those who are actually inquisitive to understand the supreme source of everything, and those who are in search of knowledge, are called transcendentalists, for they desire liberation from all material contamination.
Yeah. So in this way, we understand that actually one half are karma mishra and the other half are jnana mishra. I'm not saying this to confuse you guys. I'm just saying it so we're really going in depth with these, so you've really internalized all these categories in your minds. Okay. So the jigyasu, who is again searching for knowledge in general, the jigyasu tends to become the jnani, right? Because the jigyasu gets some knowledge, then he's situated in knowledge, but then he wants to get absolute knowledge, which is knowledge of Krishna, right? So in that sense, they're both jnana mishra. But in the other sense, because the jigyasu is just looking for general material knowledge, we can also consider him to be karma mishra, because he's not on a transcendental platform of jnana. He still has some desires. Does that make sense? If I've lost you, don't worry, because in the test, you just need to repeat the names. So it's objection relevance.
Sorry, that wasn't for you. That was just for Alex.
Oh, okay. Yeah, I thought that was okay. Yeah. So I'm just pointing this out so you can see a distinction. You can categorize them either way. I am going to ask you in the test to say who is karma mishra, who is jnana mishra, etc., etc. I'm happy with either categorization, but I just wanted to show you, pick whichever one makes more sense to you. I prefer Kaviraj Thakur's. They don't actually contradict, they're just emphasizing different aspects. So Krishna's Kaviraj Thakur is emphasizing the desire for knowledge to define them as being on a Jnana Mishra platform, whereas the standard list we hear emphasizes more what platform they are in terms of their own relationship with their desires and attachments. Okay, let's go back to the notes. There is also Yoga Mishra Bhakti, but we will discuss that in chapter 8. So Mishra Bhakti, what is that? We've got Karma Mishra Bhakti and we've got Jnana Mishra Bhakti. It's when you're executing Bhakti and it's primarily Bhakti, but it's mixed in with these other things. Okay, so far so good? Okay. So then let's move on to text 17. I'll read out the Sanskrit, and then let's have Srinivas Prabhu. Would you like to read out the English? Tesham gyani nitya yukta eka bhaktir vishishyate priyo hi gyani notyartham aham satcha mama priyaha.
Translation. Of these, the one who is in full knowledge and who is always engaged in pure devotional service is the best. For I am very dear to him and he is dear to me. Thank you, Prabhuji.
Jai. So this is very nectarian. And in this one, we find some acharyas differ exactly by what they mean by gyani. Most, and this is the way that I'm going to teach it, is that the gyani here is actually a devotee. So what's being implied here is that the gyani is very close to becoming a devotee, and then he becomes a devotee, and then he is at this platform. However, we can also understand it that it is just the standard gyani, and the reason why it's just the standard gyani is because the gyani does not have those material desires. So he will actually be stable in his Krishna consciousness. He will be stable in his execution of bhakti, right? So those are two ways of understanding it. Some will say that the gyani becomes a devotee because he's so close to becoming a devotee. He's right below it on the yoga ladder. So he becomes a devotee, and then this text is about him. Whereas others will say because he doesn't have material attachment, therefore he is the most dear. And we can see how much Krishna loves him, right? This is emphasized. Krishna doesn't just say, I am very dear to him, which would be enough to emphasize that he is the most important, or she. But also Krishna says, he is very dear to me, right? This is emphasizing the significance of this personality. So, but yeah, again, I prefer the reading of this being the Gyana. This is talking about the Gyani who has completely rejected all of the Gyana Mishra, and now they're doing pure devotional service. I think somebody was getting ready for a question. Or
Yes, Prabhu. Prabhu, there's one confusion here. So, Prabhu, here in this shloka it says the one who is in full knowledge. Now, and then he is in like and engage in full devotional service. Now, full knowledge, like that, does a person have to be very intelligent for that? Like, how do we quantify when like full knowledge? What does that mean? Like, what do you need to achieve? And then who engages in the pure devotional service is the best. Like to get to the best, like what the full knowledge? What does that mean?
The most intelligent person is the person who chants Hare Krishna. It's like that. It's pretty straightforward. Do you need to be intelligent? You need to be the most intelligent. And what is the most intelligent thing you can do? It's not to read many books. It's to chant Hare Krishna, honor prasadam, and dance in kirtans, right? Jai. So what does to be in full knowledge means? To be in full knowledge of who one is and who the Supreme Lord is. That is what we are learning in this chapter. And as we go deeper into this chapter and into the next chapters, what will we find out? That with that knowledge, what does a person do? They engage in devotion. So what does it mean to be in full knowledge? It means to chant Hare Krishna. Does that make sense? Yes,
Prabhu. Prabhu, I was thinking about myself, like if I want to, be dear to him, how many books I have to read?
Yeah, technically you don't need to read any books, but because we're executing, what does it mean to perform bhakti? It means to perform it under the guidance of those who have bhakti. And what if they said we should study these books, right? So the study of these books even the fact that one is studying Bhagavad-Gītā as it is in the mood of a devotee means they are already in full knowledge, right? So yeah, of course we can vary that, right? And as we go deeper into bhakti, we have deeper realization, so on and so forth. But yeah, don't need to worry about chant your rounds, honor prasad, listen to Harikatha, speak Harikatha, and you're all set. Okay. So Yeah, so we've heard that. However, one might ask the question then, well, if the Gyani is very valuable, then, who cares about the Artha-arthi, right? Let's throw him out the door, right? He's just, he's a lower level something, Krishna gives him some lip service, but he doesn't have any value in of himself, right? We might feel that way. And that's why Krishna speaks the next text, text 18. Maybe, Sri Mataji, would you like to read out the English after I? Uddara sarva evaite gyani tvatmaiva me matam asthita sahi yuktatma mameva nuttamam gatim.
All these devotees are undoubtedly magnanimous souls, but he who is situated in knowledge of me, I consider to be just like my own self. Being engaged in my transcendental service, he is sure to attain me, the highest and most perfect goal.
Yeah. Oh, wait a second. That's text 17. No, it's not. What am I saying? Again, my brain is failing me. Yeah, so what does Krishna say? He says, all these devotees are undoubtedly magnanimous souls, right? So Krishna's clarifying, they're all valuable to me. Bhurijan Prabhu has this wonderful extract that I'm going to read from Vishnu Chakravarti Thakur's commentary, where he comments upon this. And the question's asked to Krishna, then are the three kinds of worshippers, beginning with the distress, not dear to you? And Krishna says that's not the case at all, right? Those who worship me, taking something they want from me, which I was prepared to give them anyway, are very dear to me. They are giving so much to satisfy me, and I am very affectionate to my devotees. The Gyani, however, is like my own self. While worshipping me, he does not hanker for any benefit, neither attainment of heaven, nor liberation, nor anything else. Therefore, in my opinion, such a Gyani is my very self, and I become subordinate to him. So the implication there is that Krishna is pleased with anything that anyone gives him. Krishna is that much intoxicated by bhakti. Later on in the Bhagavad-Gītā, we'll hear the famous text, Patra Pushpam Phalam Toyam, right? Anyone who offers me anything, or whatever it is, I will honor it. And our acharyas sometimes comment, what is listed? Who's read ahead? Who can tell me what are the things that are listed that you can offer to Krishna?
A leaf.
A leaf, yeah, a flower.
Flower.
Water.
Water, yep, and fruit. So I don't know how many of you are normally eating leaves and flowers, right? And our acharyas, they comment on this because the word that's used is the word to eat. But what do our acharyas say? They say Krishna is so intoxicated by bhakti. He's so intoxicated by bhakti that he ignores the fact that this is inedibles being presented before him, and he just eats it all up. It doesn't matter if it's a leaf or if it's a flower. Krishna is so intoxicated by even that slight bit of bhakti that flower has been offered with, that leaf has been offered with, that Krishna's common sense gets overridden and he just eats it anyways. So Krishna, he is satisfied with all levels of devotion. That is the point that I really wanted to piggyback on that Abhishek Prabhu was making. This is a very elevated position. Sometimes we will speak lowly of it in order to emphasize our necessity to engage in pure devotional service. But this Jnana Mishra Bhakti, this Karma Mishra Bhakti is very, very elevated. We'll elaborate more on that, and then we will shoot through the remainder of chapter 7 in the second half, but I'll give you a 5-minute break now. Hare Krishna. Okay, so as we keep on going, we've heard about these different categories, so on and so forth. And then Vishwanath Chakravarti Thakur, I read out the glorification he gives, right? So the Gyani, right? The Gyani, he's so much absorbed in Krishna, unflinchingly, right? That Krishna considers him just to be like his own self. However, Chakravarti Thakur makes a wonderful point And he says, if this is the case, then how can we understand the pure devotees, the devotees who have abandoned the desire for knowledge even, who simply love the Lord for the sake of loving the Lord? How do we understand them? Well, if it is the case that those who are practicing Jnana Mishra Bhakti are as dear to Krishna as his own self, then it must be the case that the pure devotee is even dearer to Krishna than his own self. Krishna values the pure devotee more than he values himself. And this is the case. This is why we glorify the pure devotees so much, because the pure devotees in turn are glorified by Krishna so much, right? What does Krishna say? I'm not going to do Ras Leela Katha, don't worry. But at the end, we hear that Krishna tells all the gopis, what does he say? He says, for the love that you've all given me, I cannot repay you. I am the supreme Lord, and yet even I cannot repay you. I have said that whatever you give me, I will repay it accordingly. But even I cannot repay the love that you great devotees have given me. And therefore, I am rendered in your debt. This is the mood of Krishna towards the greatest and most purest of devotees. And this is the value that Krishna has in the pure devotees. So we should understand this. This glorification of the Jnana Mishra devotee is an implicit higher glorification of the pure devotee. Does that make sense? So we have that there. And we can also see how eager Krishna is to serve his devotees, right? He's saying even that person who's using me, right? He's using me in order to get some kingdom, in order to get something, in order to get all sorts of things. He's using me, and yet I'm so happy to please him. Krishna is itching to serve his devotees. Because Krishna is who? Who is he? What is his title in chapter 1 that I was emphasizing? And that it is the highest teaching of the Bhagavad-Gītā all the way already in chapter 1. Who can tell me? What is the title of Krishna?
Bhaktavatsala.
Bhaktavatsala. This is Krishna Bhaktavatsala. So, and so, right, in order to reach that level of devotion, right, in order to reach that perfect goal, how long will it take, right? Because we've heard all of this. We've heard about how the person approaches Krishna with desires. And then the wonderful thing is when you surrender to Krishna with all these desires, it tends to be that you are then purified of those desires and are on a higher platform, right? But then you're on the Jnana Mishra platform. But how long does it take before one reaches the highest platform? And that is what is answered in text 19. One of your memory verses, isn't it? It should be, even if it's not. Well, Mrugank Prabhu, don't share it. Has anyone learnt it yet? Let's see. Has anyone started learning your shlokas for module 2? If anyone wants to give it a go, otherwise I'll do it for you guys.
No problem.
Please go.
I'll probably get it wrong.
No, that's all right.
Bahunam janmanam ante jnanamama prapatyante vasudevam sarvam iti sa mahatma saturlabha.
Jai. This is one of the first shlokas I memorized because when I first started doing shloka memorization when I was I say when I was a teenager, which always feels weird to say because I was only a teenager like a few years ago. But when I was a teenager, and there was a list of there's a PDF you can find. I'll send it in the WhatsApp group. It has a list of all the shlokas Srila Prabhupada would quote by frequency, and this is one of the highest frequency ones. That's why I'm making this point. So Prabhupada loves this shloka. So out of all your memory shlokas, don't forget them, but this one in particular, retain it, right? Because what point is Krishna making? After many births and deaths, he who is actually in knowledge surrenders unto me, knowing me to be the cause of all causes and all that is. Such a great soul is very rare. Again, just as a little side note, people say, why do devotees, why do ISKCON members bash Mayavad so much? It's because Krishna bashes Mayavad so much. It's right there all the time. Anyways, Krishna is saying what? He is the cause of all causes. All of these things. But what is he also saying? He's saying after many births, this is achieved. Krishna is emphasizing that this actual knowledge of Krishna and his nature is very rare. How many births does it take before somebody attains this knowledge of chapter 7? many, many births. Bahunam janmanam bhante. And then what do we hear about such a person? Because this process takes so long, because this process is so complex and developed, sa mahatma su durlabha. This is what a mahatma is, right? Is somebody who is truly understanding this nature of Krishna. So Krishna, he's stressing that one who understands Vasudeva Sarvam Miti, one who truly understands the nature of Krishna, this person, he is very, very rare. Because how rare is it to actually find a person who is going to use devotion selfishly, right? We think about it. How many people selfishly go up and give an offering to Krishna? Rare in the world, right? How many people selflessly are worshipping Krishna in order to understand true knowledge? Even rarer. How many are worshipping Krishna because Krishna is Shyam Sundar, because Krishna is the all attractive, right? How many people are doing that? Much, much rarer. And so because of that, Krishna, he is emphasizing such a personality is very rare. And also Krishna is also subliminally, he's not subliminally, he's also inadvertently or indirectly also doing what he's already described, that he loves his devotees. So it's very interesting when Krishna is talking about himself, which is when he's having the full opportunity to be as narcissistic as he wants to be. And what is he using this opportunity to do? He's using it to glorify his devotee. This is the nature of Krishna, and we'll see this come out in the Bhagavad-Gītā continuously. We're not just harping on glories of the devotee, because we want, an easy ride for the devotees. We're harping on about it because Krishna is harping on about it. Krishna can't even glorify himself, explain himself without ending in a glorification of his devotee. It's all there. Okay. So far, so good? So then this is the nature of those who surrender onto Krishna, right? Understanding the nature of his energies, transcending the modes, they've surrendered onto Krishna. And now we come to the question that's already been asked. If worshipping Krishna makes the Sakama Bhaktas successful, what happens to those who worship the demigods, right? What is the nature of those who are engaged in demigod worship? So on and so forth, right? And in that, we come to text 20, okay? Text 20 will help us get into the question of the demigods. And firstly, it answers the question of, well, if we've heard all of this, where would the Mayavadi be out of the four people? A Mayavadi would normally be the Mayaprahita Gyani, generally. Either that or an Asura. Our acharyas sort of differ on where they put them. But yeah. Let me take a look. I guess, no, I wouldn't put Mudhas in that category, but definitely Mayaprahita Gyanis. Yeah, they are definitely Mayavadis. And let me just look through my notes. Yep, and the Asuras. So Mayavadis would either be Asuras or Mayaprahita Gyanis. Our acharyas differ. You can sort of see how they could fit into either category. I guess you could say it's by what motivation do they have to blaspheme the Lord in such a way as to propose Mayavad. Okay, let's smash through this section now. We can go pretty quickly so we can have an activity today. Otherwise, it's just me droning on for 2 hours. So who are these people? I'll say the Sanskrit and maybe just Prabhu. Would you like to say the English?
Yes, Prabhu.
Kamaistaistayar hirita gyanaha prapadyante nya devataha tam niyamam asthaya prakritya niyatasvaya.
Translation. Those whose intelligence has been stolen by material desires surrender unto demigods and follow the particular rules and regulations of worship according to their own natures.
Jai. Right. So I think this is pretty straightforward. This is what we were already discussing in chapter 4. Do we remember this? In chapter 4, Krishna discusses those who worship the demigods. They do so because they want the quick results, right? They want quick things. So now we're having a bit of a further deliberation on this topic, right? So why do they do that? Because their intelligence have been stolen by their material desires. They surrender to the demigods because they want things, right? And because they want things, they will quickly go to the demigods who will do them. And they will adopt various rules and regulations according to their own natures, right? We'll see people who worship different demigods will do so in different ways, right? And it all depends on what modes they are under. Let's keep going quickly because I don't have too much to say here. So let's have Alex, would you like to read out the English of text 21?
Yep.
Yo yo yam yam tanum bhaktaha shraddhaya chittum ichchati tasya chalam shraddham tameva viddhyama yaham.
I am in everyone's heart as the super soul. As soon as one desires to worship some demigod, I make his faith steady so that he can devote himself to that particular deity.
And then let's just go to the next text. Divyansh Prabhu, if you'd like to read out the English. Sattaya shraddhaya yuktas tasya radhanam ihate labhate cha tatah kaman mayaiva vihitan hitan.
Endowed with such a faith, he endeavors to worship a particular demigod and obtains his desires. But in actuality, these benefits are bestowed by me alone.
So we'll discuss those two quickly. And then we'll come to text 20. Actually, no, we'll do text 23 as well. Text 23 contextualizes as well. Maybe let's have Damini. Would you like to read out the English? Antavattu phalam tesham tadbhavatyalpa medhasam devan deva yajo yanti madbhakta yanti mamapi.
Men of small intelligence worship the demigods, and their fruits are limited and temporary. Those who worship the demigods go to the planet of the demigods, but my devotees ultimately reach my supreme planet.
Yep. So, so here we find the principle of demigod worship established. And this is one of the reasons why we blast demigod worship so much, even though, again, we have a lot of reverence for the demigods, right? Again, I always need to clarify this. People tend to swing in either direction. They either hear we respect the demigods and then all they do is demigod worship because they hear we're meant to respect the demigods, or they hear this blasting and then they blaspheme the demigods. Both extremes we don't like, right? We're smack dab in the middle. What is the point that's being made here? Two things. Firstly, Krishna is living by this motto. I genuinely think the most significant text in order to understand the nature of Krishna is ye yatham mam prapadyante tam stataiva bhajamyaham, right? Krishna here, what is he saying? He's saying that as soon as one desires to worship a demigod, I make his faith steady, so he's able to actually genuinely execute that, right? And then what does he say? He's the one who gives the benefits. Now, why does he need to do that? That is clarified in text 23, that the fruits are limited and temporary, okay? Why do we blast demigod worship? Because what it can give you is inherently only limited and temporary, because the demigods are only limited and temporary. The demigods will die the same way we will. How can they give that which is eternal? We see the similar thing with Hiranyakashipu, right? He prays for immortality. He doesn't get immortality. Because how can a demigod give him immortality, right? Brahma too will die. So how can Brahma give that which he does not have? The demigods do not have anything that is eternal, so they cannot give anything that is eternal. And therefore, Krishna is the one who gives even the faith, right? Even the faith that the demigod worshippers need is given by Krishna, as is the fruits. Why even the fruits? Because even the temporary things that are given by the demigods are only given by the demigods because Krishna gave it to them. The demigods only have their position because Krishna's given it to them. So even those things which the demigods give ultimately are only given by Krishna. Even the faith to worship a demigod is only given by Krishna, right? So why do demigod worship then? It makes no sense. Why get something that is lesser, that is anyways given by Krishna, when you can get something greater from Krishna directly?
Is it because it's quicker?
Well, yeah, that's exactly it. But so that's the reason why people do justify it, right? But the point that's being made is in the grand scheme, it makes no sense because you're quickly getting something that's not going to last at all, right? What's the point of quickly getting? It sort of reminds me of have you all seen that video of that raccoon who gets fairy floss and he goes to wash it and then it washes away in the water? That's everything that we get from demigods, right? We go and we get so excited. I've got this quickly. I've got this wonderful meal. And then we go to store it. In his case, he's washing it. So they're going to be clean and then washed away, right? So yeah, you can get it quicker. But my point isn't, why don't you just go to Krishna for material things? Even though it kind of also is like, please do that. But it's more so, why even settle for material things? They're temporary. They're not going to last, right? So in all ways, it doesn't make sense. You may as well go to Krishna, get it from the source, and that way you can also get eternal benefits as well, right? If we're thinking in that selfish way. Much better is just go to Krishna and get that which is eternal. And what is eternal? It is love, it is bhakti, it is devotion. That is what is eternal. So Krishna here, he's critiquing that, right? And the demigods actually don't have any independent existence. As I've said, even for to believe in the demigods, that faith is provided by Krishna. Ultimately, yeah. So then we also hear the final point that Krishna makes in this text, right? Those who worship the demigods go to the planet of the demigods. Again, yeya tam mam prapadyante tam tathaiva bhajamyaham, right? Krishna lets you go where you want to go. And if you're constantly worshiping the demigods, you're going to go where the demigods are. Does that make sense? It's not that Krishna is punishing you for worshiping the demigods. If you want to worship the demigods, and go where the demigods are. But do not forget that where the demigods are, there is still death. You will still die. Oh, wait, is this the Planet of the Trees text? I'm using the 1983 edition.
Isn't that in Nectar of Devotion? Not even here.
No. Planet of the Trees is Bhagavad-gītā.
No.
But yeah. Look, honestly, if I had to choose between Planet of the Trees and Go Look, I'd go Planet of the Trees. But thankfully, the Planet of the Trees doesn't exist. So yeah. What we have here is that at the end of the day, you go to the demigods, you live with the demigods, and then you'll die with the demigods. But if you go to Goloka, if you go with Krishna, you can dance with Krishna, you can live with Krishna, and you can keep on dancing with the Krishna because the dancing doesn't end there, right? That's the point that's being made. So demigod worship, you're just getting something from Krishna anyways. What you're getting is temporary, and you're going to take both where you're attached to, and where you're taking both is barely better, arguably worse than here, right? And we also find strict, intense, mindless pluralism rejected here. Sometimes people will say, Krishna, he's saying he'll reinforce the faith. Yeah, but that's what Krishna does, right? It doesn't mean that therefore you worship whatever you want. We're all going to go back home, back to Godhead, to go look over and up. You have to have an attachment to Krishna to go to Krishna. Otherwise, Krishna isn't fulfilling his deal of the bargain where he says, I will reciprocate your desires. Krishna's mercy, in one sense, can backfire, and this would be an example of it. Okay. On that note, let's go now to the final, well, not the final section, the second final section, which is more Mayavad bashing, which is everyone's favorite pastime. If you're a ISKCON devotee, bashing Mayavad is like our It's like our national sport, right? And thankfully, Krishna likes to do it as well. So we're going to come to text 24. Maybe we can have, who have I not asked? Varun, Prabhu, if you would like to read out the English of text 24. This one is also a famous text. Is Varun Prabhu AWOL? Yes.
Right here.
Oh, you're right here? Okay. Avyaktam vyaktim apanam manyante mam abuddhayaha param bhavam ajananto mama vyayam anuttamam.
Unintelligent men who do not know me perfectly think that I, the Supreme Personality of Godhead, Krishna, was impersonal before and have now assumed this personality. Due to their small knowledge, they do not know my higher nature, which is imperishable and supreme. Jai.
So, by the way, the purports of these sections are just absolutely nectar in terms of just totally smashing. AWOL means away without leave. Just smashing Mayavad. This is a really, really beautiful purport. Again, if we had more time, I would have us all read it out, but definitely please go home and reread this one. It's a really, really good one. So, as all of Prabhupada's purports are, but I'm just saying this one is really, really nectar. So what we find here is we find the Mayavad, again, Mayavad absolutely destroyed, right? Unintelligent men, abuddhayaha. If we go to text 23 quickly, what is the word that's used to describe the demigod worshipper? Who can find it? Alpamedhasam, right? The alpamedhas, right? They are those with small intelligence. But what is that is the demigod worshipper. What is the Mayavadi described as in text 24? Abuddhayaha. In Sanskrit, that's even worse than the Alpamedha, right? So the Mayavadi is in an even worse position than the demigod worshipper, okay? Again, nectar purport, please go read it quickly. So we have this completely unintelligent men. They think Krishna was impersonal before, now is assumed personality, so on and so forth. Again, Mayavad refuted. But one may wonder, well, why it's so obvious to all of us, right? It's so obvious to all of us. We're reading the Gita, Krishna has form. It just makes so much sense that the Supreme Personality of Godhead, it just makes so much sense that he's, how should I put it? That he's a little blue boy who plays the flute, right? It's so obvious. Why don't they understand that? We come to text 25. And text 25, who's here? Mrunal Mataji, would you like to read out the English? Naham prakasha sarvasya yoga maya samavritaha mudhuyam na bhijananti loko mam ajam avyayam.
I am never manifest to the foolish and unintelligent. For them, I am covered by my internal potency, and therefore they do not know that I'm unborn and infallible.
So there we have it, right? Krishna here, he's talking about how, why don't they see him? Because Krishna is not manifest to the foolish and the unintelligent. Why is that the case? Because it seems a bit cruel. Again, ye yatam mam prapadyante tam taiva bhajamyaham, right? Krishna reciprocates. And so if somebody is in a mood where they don't want to acknowledge Krishna's form, then Krishna hides himself with his internal potency. Okay? And therefore, we see when Krishna is manifesting his pastimes, some people saw Krishna and they saw a regular person. Some people just saw a regular guy, right? Some people saw death personified. Some people saw all sorts of things, right? But only those who have the eyes to see saw that Krishna was the Supreme Personality of Godhead. Okay? So now then, as we move on, we now will transition into the final section. And this section is speaking about how somebody can go from being in a foolish position, as we've discussed, and to go into a non-foolish position, right? Gita Subodhini writes it really, really nicely. I love their title for this section. It's From Delusion by Maya to Devotion to Krishna. That is this section here, okay? So the natural question might come up, well, if Krishna is able to bewilder all of these people by Maya, then can Krishna himself be bewildered by Maya? And therefore he speaks this text. Let's have Shivam Prabhu read out the English. Vedaham samatittani vartamanani charjuna bhavishyani cha bhutani mam tu veda nakaschana.
O Arjuna, as the Supreme Personality of Godhead, I know everything that has happened in the past, all that is happening in the present, and all things that are yet to come. I also know all living entities, but me, no one knows.
Jai. So, again, we're having a really wonderful indirect sort of glorification again, right? I also know all living entities, but me, no one knows, right? But this is used almost for rhetorical effect. No one knows me just means that only those very few devotees know me, right? It's the complete scarcity of the devotee. The devotee is such an elevated position in knowledge of the absolute. Again, let's not forget, the whole topic for this entire chapter is knowledge of the absolute. That devotee who has that knowledge is in such a position that Krishna can say, no one knows me. Okay? And so therefore Krishna, he's saying that he is not covered by Maya. However, everyone else is, at least in this material world, right? And therefore, what do we see? He knows everything that has happened in the past, all that is happening in the present, and all things in the future. I know all living entities, but no one knows me. Now, we may wonder, well, how can Krishna say this? No one knows me, right? And Krishna, of course, he's discussed this before already, right? The three modes of material nature of bewildering everyone. But let's go to text 27, and I'm just going to read the English, I think, for the next few, because I do want to get to our activity, which will begin chapter 8. What does he say? O scion of Bharat, O conqueror of the foe, all living entities are born into delusion, bewildered by dualities arisen from desire and hate. Who can tell me what are the two words for desire and hate?
Icha and dvesha.
Icha and dvesha. This is the same thing as kama dvesha. Remember, we've discussed this before. Raga dvesha, sorry. Remember we discussed raga dvesha. This is a throwback to like chapter 2. Raga dvesha, icha dvesha, same difference, okay?
Like 265 or something?
Yeah. And so this is the nature, right, of everyone's delusion. Why are people unable to see the Supreme Lord? Why are they bewildered by the three modes, right? It's one thing to say they are bewildered by the three modes, but why are they bewildered by the three modes? Because all living entities from the beginning, they've defined their existence by I want this and I hate this, right? It's the duality of existence. We've talked about this before, so I won't talk about it much. But the moment, what is the first element that forms in the material universe is ego. And what is the ego used to do? I am this, right? And then because I am this, I want this, right? Because I am this, I don't want this, right? And because of all of these dualities that arise from desire and hate, everyone is caught up. Again, that's why party spirit is bad. That's why going back to chapter 1, Mamakaha Pandavaschayuva, right? What does my army and the sons of Pandu do? It's there from the beginning. These dualities, I am this, I am not this, I identify with this, I do not identify with this. Because of all of those things, everyone is bewildered by the three modes. Now we have now we may wonder, this is very discouraging, right? We have text 28. which is saying persons who have acted piously in previous lives and in this life, and whose sinful actions are completely eradicated, are freed from the dualities of delusion, and they engage themselves in my service with determination, right? Why is this being mentioned? Because after hearing this, we might be discouraged. Krishna has said, no one knows me. He said, everyone is born in ignorance, right? But now what is he saying? He's saying the people who can overcome this, who are they? They are those whose sins are eradicated, who have acted piously in previous and present lives, and who are freed from the dualities of delusion, right? So these people are qualified to take to this, right? However, one may wonder, I am none of these things. I don't have any hope, right? That is the curiosity that might come to our mind. However, again, our acharyas have made the point that simply by the glance of the pure devotee, one is already having all of these qualifications. One's sins are eradicated simply by being engaged by the pure devotee. One is considered to be the most pious simply to have been seen by the pure devotee, right? All of these things are achieved by the association of the pure devotee. So who can do this bhakti? The person who has had the association of the devotees. And again, Purijan Prabhu, he makes this point by quoting Baladev Vibhushan's commentary. And how does he make this point? What does he say? Baladev Vibhushan, he says, those living beings who receive the merciful glance of the topmost pure souls will have all their sinful reactions destroyed. And those who have all of those sinful reactions destroyed, they are considered punya karmanam, right? They are considered to be very pious and all those things. So this is not saying that one actually needs all of these prerequisites. What it's saying is that one needs to be purified by the pure devotee, which is central and which we've discussed already many times before. Bhakti begins when the devotee qualifies us for it. Okay? And then now, to wrap up the chapter and to introduce us to chapter 8, which will then lead us to our activity, which we'll wrap up today's session with, and then go into questions with. Krishna now, he discusses one final type of the Mishra Bhakti, right? And this one is described as, actually, I will say the Sanskrit for this one just because it's important. Maybe Mrugank Prabhu, do you want to say the English after I said the Sanskrit?
Yeah.
Jara marana mokshaya mama shritya yatantiye te brahma tad vidhu kritsnam adhyatmam karma chakhilam.
Intelligent persons who are endeavoring for liberation from old age and death take refuge in me in devotional service. They are actually Brahman because they entirely know everything about transcendental activities.
Jai. Okay, so this one is very nectarian. He's describing, as Srikanta Sena Prabhu's told us, the moksha kami, right? So his desires are mixed in with the desire for moksha, for liberation. He doesn't want knowledge. He doesn't want karmic fruits. He wants liberation, right? And this is again not pure bhakti. If you ask so many devotees, I've even heard more, newer to bhakti devotees giving Bhagavatam class and saying this on the Vyasasana, and it hurts my ears every time. They'll say, we are doing Krishna consciousness in order to attain liberation and go to Vaikuntha, to go to the spiritual world. No, we are not. We could not care less for liberation. Liberation is irrelevant to us, and it is not pure bhakti, and it is being listed here because we are still discussing not pure bhakti. Again, the Bhagavad-Gītā is so gradual. It's giving us such a perfect outline of the whole variety and world of spiritual life, right? And so we are discussing only the Mishra Bhaktis in this chapter. We get some hints of pure bhakti, but mainly we're discussing the mixed bhaktis. And so we're finding another type of mixed bhakti. But I'm just making this point, do not think that this is pure, that now we've had, at the end of the chapter, we've got a mention of pure devotional service. This is not pure devotional service. This is also Mishra Bhakti. If you are doing Bhakti because you don't want to take birth again in the material world, at the best, you're Moksha Mishra Bhakti, which is worshipable, but not the platform we want to be at. Okay. And then we hear, who have I not asked? Uma Mataji, would you like to read out the English?
Yes, Prabhuji. Those in full consciousness of me, who knows me, the Supreme Lord, to be the governing principle of the material manifestation of the demigods and all of all methods of sacrifice, can understand and know me, the Supreme Personality of Godhead, even at the time of death. Thank you, Prabhuji.
So we found here that Krishna, he's just, well, how do I put this? Krishna in this text, he's really setting up the next chapter. These last two, 29 and 30, really set up the next chapter, okay? And so Krishna now, he's describing some other aspects of the nature of devotion, of devotional service, right? He's giving more information and more understanding of this knowledge and how this knowledge can be used to attain liberation, okay? And beyond. So with that, we've concluded this 7th chapter. And again, just to summarize, the 7th chapter has been entirely about knowledge of the absolute, right? We've heard about the nature of how the Lord relates to Maya, and we've heard then how we relate to Maya, right? So at the beginning, we've heard that Krishna is the source of all Maya. All Maya, all energy comes from Krishna, okay? All of that energy comes from Krishna, but Krishna is above that energy. Krishna controls that energy. He's the source of that energy, right? And that energy is both him and not him. So we've heard all of these details. Other details we've heard is that we've heard that we also relate to Maya, but we relate to Maya by totally being bewildered by Maya, right? And how do we escape from that bewilderment of Maya? We escape it by surrendering to Krishna. If we do not surrender to Krishna, we tend to surrender to either the demigods or to death itself, right? So all of this chapter is a summary of knowledge of the absolute. It is knowledge of Krishna and the way he relates to his energies. Is this clear? I just like to give a cap of the chapter so we can feel the flow of the Gita, right? Ideally, at the end of this course, all of you I can ask you a chapter and you can give me a rough idea what the chapter was about, okay? Now it's 11:55. If we don't, I'm trying to think, it might get too close for an activity. I think it's too close. I think it's too close for an activity. We'll start next week then with the activity. First thing up, we'll have our activity. The activity, actually, it'll even work out better if we do at the beginning of next week. Your homework is, how far have you all gone into your reading? Has anyone started chapter 8? I think I did put chapter 8 as a reading in the WhatsApp group. Has anyone gotten into chapter 8? No one has. I will just leave the homework as being read up to text 16. So if you can read up to text 16 and chapter 8, then Haribo. Has anyone already done that? If anyone's already done that, I'll send a cool class I heard by Sachinandan Swami on the structure of the Gita. I'll send that into the WhatsApp group. Listen to that as your homework, because I do think it's really relevant to what we're doing right now. It'll help situate your understanding. Do that as your homework if you've already read up to text 16, or reread up until text 16. You can do either one. Otherwise, for everyone else, please read up to text 16. I will have assumed you've already read the texts, and the activity will be based on you already having had read the texts when we start next week. Okay, any questions? Oh, I see Mrugank Prabhu. Does that mean Mayavad existed back then? Well, I mean, yeah, Krishna's saying it does exist back then. I can't comment too much about it, but Krishna is saying, maybe Krishna knew the future and he knew that people would start saying that, but he seems to be using the present tense. He's saying foolish people say that. So there must have been at least one person saying that, right? I don't have any further comments on it. I wouldn't really be able to tell you more. because it doesn't seem to describe people like the four Kumaras, like the Brahmavadis. It does seem to be straight up describing Mayavadis. So yeah. Any other questions?
If we say every time Krishna refers to people who consider his spiritual form to be material, is that necessarily Mayavad, or is that also atheism? It's just that philosophy part of it confuses me a little bit.
Well, in general, we tend to say that that's atheism. I mean, that's Mayavad. Like a key defining element of Mayavad is the idea, because Mayavadis will say, how do I put it? It's not technically always Mayavad, but the reason why we define it that way is the defining difference between the Mayavadi and the Brahmavadi is that the Mayavadi thinks that Krishna's body is, so the Brahman effulgence is permutated in a material form of Krishna, right? So they think that Krishna's form is an entirely material form, but it's a material transformation of Maya. If somebody just straight up thought Krishna is just a historical figure and there is no God, I would struggle to call them a Mayavadi, right? But yeah, so I guess you could say that he's referring to atheists as well in that.
I guess my question, I mean, like, thank you, that makes sense. But so, like, I don't think it hurts the Mayavad philosophy to accept that if Krishna takes birth, he comes in a spiritual form, as long as they continue to believe that we become Krishna when we.
Yeah. So that's, well, the reason why it hurts Mayavad is because it's the historical Mayavad perspective that Krishna's form is material. Where it gets messed up, even in the other form, which is the form Madhusudan Saraswati, where they say that Krishna comes in a spiritual form, it's a spiritual formed form, if you get what I mean, which then goes back to being formless, is what Krishna says. Fools say that I was unmanifest at one point and now manifest here. He doesn't say fools say that I was immaterial at one point and now I'm material here. He talks about the actual manifest formed nature, right? People say that I'm at one point an unmanifest principle and now I've become a manifest principle. And that causes issue with both Mayavad schools. So traditional Mayavad will say that Krishna's body was made straight up of matter. However, the Neo-Mayavad of Madhusudan Saraswati argues that Krishna's body was somehow transcendental, but it's like a permutation of the impersonal Brahman. Both get contradicted by Krishna here.
That makes sense. Thank you.
Any other questions?
I've got more questions. If it's okay.
Yeah, for sure.
We
ended early, so yeah, I'm comfortable.
Okay.
For many questions.
When people say it's the unborn within Krishna speaking, the only argument we really have is to say that there is no difference between Krishna's body and Krishna's the person who's speaking the Gita and Krishna's body, etc. But like, what's the shloka that says that? Because when Krishna says in this chapter, there is nothing beyond me, I don't know how to frame this, but you know what I mean, right? Like it's using that shloka, I don't think you can necessarily prove that there is no difference between the one who is speaking and the one who has the body. Maybe I'm just not thinking.
No, I get what you're saying. I think the issue with that is that when Krishna speaks, he's saying mom, right? He's saying me, he's saying I, and then what's he saying? There is no one shlok, but all of the shloks together build up that image, right? Because what does Krishna say? You know, he says that I am uniquely the thread upon which, I'm the thread upon which all the pearls are strung, right? So he's situating himself as unique in comparison to everyone else, right? You guys can't remember it, but I can. So Krishna is consistently establishing himself as unique. Already there you're having issues with Mayavad, because if we're saying it's the impersonal unborn within Krishna, then he should still be able to say that about Arjuna as well, because Arjuna has that unborn within him as well. So we already have that issue that Krishna is explicitly making a difference between himself and others. Then you have Krishna saying stuff like that fools say I was unmanifested at one point. So he's saying he's eternally manifested, right? If he's eternally manifested, then he's clearly of a different nature to all the other bodies that he's discussing, right? He talks even about demigods, right? And he says they are perishable, but I am imperishable, right? So I guess if you want to split hairs, there is a text, and I'm just mind blanking. There is a text where you can pull the whole Krishna is not different to his body thing from, but even without that, you would really struggle to then go all the way to Mayavad with all of the clear delineation Krishna has already made. Krishna has already made clear that his position is eternal, and he's also made clear that his position is incredibly unique. So it's not a position that he's attained, which you could argue. It's a position he's always had, and it's also a position that is radically unique to literally everything else that in existence. He situates quite literally everything else as compared to him. Does that make sense?
Yes, definitely. Thank you.
But yeah, no, there is one text, and I'm just mind blanking because I'm just round twoing a flu. So yeah, I'm burning off some karma. So yeah, so I'm mind blanking on which text it is, but there is a text which discusses, which you can pull out Krishna is non-different to his body from. It's not coming to my mind right now.
I have another question.
Definitely in Srimad Bhagavatam, though, sorry, not to interrupt you. Definitely in Srimad Bhagavatam, I can think of them already, where it straight up says stuff like that. I swear there's one in the Gita, I'm just not remembering now.
I'm satisfied with you saying that like a collection of verses together make it very difficult.
Yeah. I think it's easy to be a Mayavadi if the Bhagavad-Gita was tweeted, if you get what I mean. Like it's all these individual tweets and they're all like independent. Yeah, then you can be a Mayavadi till the cows come home, right? But to actually read the Gita in flow, pretty difficult.
Regarding Krishna being the cause of everything, like, you know, sometimes we say, oh, this is Krishna's mercy, or this is Krishna's hand in my life, etc. Like, one understanding I've heard is that in one sense, we don't know whether it's Krishna's cause or not, but because Krishna is the cause of everything, ultimately, like the supreme remote cause, therefore everything is caused by Krishna. So my question is, those people who believe that Sai Baba, for example, is the supreme, those people who believe some other deity, which according to our philosophy is not even considered divine, is the supreme, and therefore they are causing everything. And, you know, they in their experience are convinced that, look, I prayed to this person and this person is now influencing my life. How are we supposed to deal with people like that, or deal with that argument? Because technically speaking, the only thing we have different to them is just a different faith. It's not like, I don't know of any substantial argument that's going to put our cause above theirs.
Ganesham Prabhu told me this really fun story. He was once invited to speak at a Sai Baba event, and he knew that at a Sai Baba event, you can't, I mean, philosophy is pushing it, right? Let alone heavy philosophy, right? So his whole talk was talking about the six opulences, right? And that was it. He said, what does Bhagavan mean? It means, have you heard the story? Okay, so he was talking about the six opulences, and he was, and he gave the whole talk, and he described, this is the nature of Bhagavan. He is, you know, most knowledgeable, most renounced, most beautiful, most wealthy, like that. And that was his whole talk, right? And at the end, when Mataji came, and that was it, like that was he didn't rail against Sai Baba or anything. And at the end, this one Mataji came up to him. She said, you know, I'm worshipping Sai Baba as Bhagavan, but when I think about it, he's not that beautiful. I look at him and he's actually a little ugly. That's what she said. And then now she's an initiated devotee. I think she's a disciple of Devamrita Maharaj, right? And that was her whole that was her whole thing, right? She was saying, like, you're saying the supreme, so we have Shastras giving a clear definition of what Bhagavan is, right? And Bhagavan is the most beautiful. And I think that's intuitively true. I don't think you even need to go to Shastra to say the truth is beautiful. Like, it's that weird thing. If you enjoy math, it's just strangely beautiful how, you know, clean mathematics, you know what I mean? There's this elegant beauty to it. I think it's just intuitively true that beauty is true, right? And so I think I often just like to think, find me someone more beautiful than Krishna, and I'll worship Krishna instead, right? But Krishna really fulfills those categories of what Bhagavan is. So I do think we can, I personally wouldn't debate it, because I don't think it's hard. if somebody hasn't reasoned themselves into a view, it's hard to reason them out. It's hard to reason somebody out of a view they haven't reasoned themselves into. I just think eventually they'll get purified, but you can plant those little seeds, right? I do think we can logically for ourselves determine it. A, with Shastra, and B, just logically, like Krishna is infinitely beautiful.
I mean, like, okay, that makes sense in terms of someone like Saiva, where let's say they believe that Shiva is God, but they believe it's the supreme God. So therefore, whatever attributes we give to Krishna, they give the same attributes to just another deity. Then that becomes harder, right? Like then it's like
it becomes harder, but we will discuss this in Nectar of Devotion. Nectar of Devotion, I think, is the most thorough explication of Krishna being the Supreme Personality of Godhead. Like not to defer your question, but Nectar of Devotion, in my opinion, when we study it, it's like the best argument for Krishna is the Supreme Personality of Godhead.
Yeah.
Because that's when we'll go through and we'll talk about why Krishna uniquely has these qualities of infinite beauty that you can't actually apply anywhere else. Yeah.
Thank you.
Srikanta Sena Prabhu.
Hare Krishna Prabhu, thanks for the class. It's really nice. This chapter is so lovely compared to
yeah,
it's so nice. Speaking about Bhakti Yoga. And I was just, that middle portion of this chapter speaks about demigod worship. And that's obviously from the realm of the materialist way of worshipping demigods. But then we can compare that, like how do we think of it when we compare it to Krishna's most intimate associates who he values the most than anyone else, such as the gopis who pray to Caitanya Devi, and the gopas who pray to various demigods. Like for example, they even consider their carts to be some form of demigod which carries their wealth around. So, but they obviously see Krishna. They're obviously Kevala Bhaktas in the sense that they're fully dedicated to Krishna, but in their actions seem to be somewhat matching what Krishna is describing here, but it's completely different. Like, how does one even consider that kind of that difference between the two?
Do you know who Srimati Radharani's Ishtadev is?
It's not Katyayani, it's deeper,
it's
isn't
Surya. Surya, yeah. Srimati Radharani is a Surya devotee. Wait, wow, thank you. I was just about to comment quickly. I will come on to that. It's a really good question. But no, I'm fully with you, Alex. Like at one point, it's just like you're just singing in the kirtan and you're like, it is what it is. Like, it's just a fact. Krishna is God. When you're in kirtan, like it's as true as 1 + 1 = 2. You know, that clearly Krishna is the Supreme Personality of God. People find it a cop-out, but all of our knowledge is experiential. And I think kirtan is a really profound argument for Krishna. But so the point,
Prabhu, just on that point, I just wanted to. Someone asked me last night about Mrugank's point as well. Yeah, at Kirtan Sydney, and it seems to be somewhat, at least in my experience, that rather than in terms of argument and engaging in some kind of debate, which is useful for certain purposes in Krishna consciousness, but our own conduct and the way in which we imbibe our own philosophy and actually execute that and actually show that we are actually engaging in a relationship with Krishna personally ourselves, that we can actually show others of the truth in this philosophy.
100%, I couldn't agree more. I'll make a point. Sorry.
No, I mean, like, that's true if you want to preach, but I was asking more from a what's the
philosophical word?
What is the truth point of view?
I agree with that.
And that's what I find. Philosophy, like arguments and all, are for insiders, and sadhana is for outsiders.
Because I can feel like Ganasham's points, there was none of them was argumentative, but it was this bhakti which was obviously the most foremost.
How does Mahaprabhu convince Sarvabhauma Bhattacharya, the greatest Mayavadi of India at the time? How does he convince him that Krishna is the Supreme Personality of Godhead? He is silent while he speaks. He is silent for 7 days. With silence, he conquers the greatest logician on earth at the time, right? How does Mahaprabhu convince Venkanta Bhatta, of devout Sri Vaishnav, that Krishna is the Supreme Personality of Godhead? He starts making jokes about Lakshmi Devi's chastity. Like, it makes no sense. Krishna consciousness is absurd. How does Srila Prabhupada convince so many people to take up Krishna consciousness? He sits under a tree and sings kirtan. You know what I mean?
So nice.
Krishna consciousness is absurd. There's a really famous church father who has a statement that I love. Krishna consciousness, he doesn't say Krishna consciousness, but he says it's so absurd it must be true. And that's my general view. Okay, as to the point with the demigods, so all of them, again, what is absurdity in this world is truth in that world. In this world, if I say I'm my body, I will laugh at you, right? If you say I am my body, I'm like, okay, yeah, cool, like, right? In the spiritual world, when they say they know they're their body and they are their body, the gopis are their bodies, right? Krishna also is his body. The gopas are their bodies there. There is no difference between soul and body there. That is truly their identity, right? What is up is down, right? It's a totally inverted world. So when we see those sort of things, it isn't the same, even though externally it seems like that. The reason why they do it is because it adds to the sweetness. In Vaikuntha, they're not worshipping Indra. But in Goloka, they're praying to Surya. Why are they praying to Surya? For Krishna to be protected. Why are they praying to the demigods? So that Krishna can be protected, so that they can see Krishna more often. They are praying to the demigods because it is sweet that their love has blinded them to the fact that Krishna is even God, right? And so therefore they need some supernatural help in their day-to-day pastimes. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
So it's because of this. It's because it increases the sweetness, right? It's so sweet that they like. It's like when Krishna lifts Govardhan mountain, right? I always use the wrong hand when I do that example, right? When Krishna lifts up Govardhan mountain, what are all the cowherd men doing? They're helping him with their sticks, right? It's the same sort of principle. All right, like that makes no sense. We don't in the material world. We don't go, hey Krishna, I'm going to help you out making the sun rise, right?
Yeah,
it doesn't make sense, but it makes sense there because it's intensifying their sweetness, right? And so that's the reason why they do it, because it's the sweetness of their forgetfulness of Krishna's divinity. And why do they do it? They don't do it because, oh, I don't think Krishna's God, so I'm going to get, I'm going to pray for a Lamborghini. They're still praying as an expression of their devotion for Krishna. I'll send you do you know Hindi?
No.
Okay, I'll send you an English translation of what my Guru Maharaj gave a lecture on this, in terms of the Katyayani Vrat. Yeah.
Very nice.
Yeah, that makes
Thanks,
sense.
Prabhu. Thank you so much.
I'll finish on a pastime because even Krishna gets in on this. It's described by Rupa Goswami that actually Krishna sometimes, Mother Jashoda, sometimes Krishna, he would become scared that the demons, which are always out to get him, would kill him. Krishna would become afraid when he was little, so he would be scared of it. And all the time he would be afraid. And all the time, Mother Jashoda, she would cure his fear by sitting him down and telling him about the most evil and scariest demon of them all, Hiranyakashipu. And Krishna would become so afraid hearing about Hiranyakashipu. He's thinking, oh no, if those other demons didn't succeed, Hiranyakashipu will. This is the scariest guy I've ever heard. And Krishna would become completely afraid and he wouldn't be able to sleep at all. He was already afraid and now he's completely wide awake, but he needs to sleep. And so Mother Jashoda, she will continue to tell this story. And then, though, she will mention the part about Nrsingadev. And Nrsingadev comes out and he kills Hiranyakashipu. And at this point, Krishna, he falls asleep. And he falls asleep because he knows, even if Hiranyakashipu tries to kill him, Nrsingadev will come and protect him. That's the sweetness of Krishna's pastimes, what to do. They're very hard to grasp, but they're very easy to enjoy. So yeah.
Thank you for sharing that, Prabhuji. I just want to add to that point you mentioned just now. Even in the Damodarastakam pastime, actually the Acharya is saying that is Krishna really afraid of Mother Yashoda in that pastime? What is your answer, Prabhuji?
Yes, he's petrified.
So
yeah.
So it is actually increases the sweetness of his pastimes. So Krishna was actually afraid of Mother Yashoda.
Yeah, for sure. And in fact, it's described because what does it say? Dhammamishwaram Sachidananda Rupa Yashoda Yulo. I can't remember now which part of the Sanskrit.
Prudanta Muhur Netram.
No, it's not that. It's before that.
Fear? Is it the fear?
When Mother Jashoda captures him, she catches him. That is it. I don't want to sing through the whole thing to remember. What it says is it actually describes that Mother Yashoda has caught Krishna from behind. What it means to be caught from behind means you were trying to escape until the last second. It's not that Krishna gives in and lets Mother Yashoda capture him. It's that Krishna until the last second did not want to be caught by his mother. But even Krishna, who outruns all others walking, who is faster than the senses, faster than the mind, cannot outrun his devotee because it increases the sweetness. Krishna himself is fully conquered by his devotee. And until the last second, he doesn't want to give in and he's still trying to wrestle away. But Mother Yashoda, this sweet, innocent, cowherd woman, is able to wrestle the supreme absolute truth into submission. Again, yeah, high stuff. Jai. Well, that was very Rasik. Always nice to say some Rasik pastimes. I'll try and find that class Guru Maharaj gave, because he goes into all the depths of demigod worship in Goloka and all that. He discusses it for a bit.
Hare Krishna.
Yeah, okay, well, if there was anything else. Okay then, well, let's wrap up there. Grantharaj Srimad Bhagavad-gītā ki jai, Srila Prabhupada ki jai, Vanchakalpatarubhyascha Vacha Patitanam Pavanebhyo Vaishnavebhyo Namo Namaha. Okay, Hare Krishna.
Hare Krishna.
Hare Krishna, Prabhu.
Hare Krishna.
Hare Krishna, Prabhuji, thank you.
Hare Krishna.